Tidus, how come you can breathe underwater?
Well, if you've tossed enough blitzballs around... Huh?
What?
I'll tell you about it some other time.
Yeah, okay, so I have no idea how the fuck this happened either. But I think we somehow ended up in the bizarro timeline where some stupid inconsequential spin-off could possibly be a better game than the long-awaited Final Fantasy 15. Yep, we've done it, guys. Give yourself a round of applause. Pat on the back, have a whack, kill me. Man, fandoms sure are great, aren't they? From the perfectly withheld and politely introverted lovers of Undertale, Homestuck, and Five Nights at Freddy's, to the lovely fun-filled safe spaces harbinged by titles like Silent Hill. People bonding in friendly bondage over their shared love of a specific thing, no matter if you like it for slightly different reasons. I mean, it's not like anyone will end up calling you a pleb or a retard or ridicule you publicly by way of a cheeky subtweet or even dox you for simply liking or disliking something for a reason that isn't their own. And similarly joyous is the combined cult surrounding Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts. One I myself fervently partake in from the back, staring at a distance at all the circular masturbatory practices. And what better way to cash in on such an orgy than by giving the thirsty buggers exactly what they want. World of Final Fantasy, as the titular title might already imply, is an amalgamation of everything the series has ever stood for and currently still stands for. From character cameos, classic monsters, iconic areas, and nostalgic music to even straight uplifting entire mechanics and gameplay ideas, this game does it all. And somehow relevant to this are two young teenagers by the names of Lon and Rain, who randomly get woke one day in a world where time has stopped and everyone is dead. They don't quite realize this, however, and so they still work in their cafe where they serve the equivalent of no one, until all of a sudden a mysterious guest arrives. This guest claims to be God and tells them to go to the world of Grimoire to do some shit in order to become the ultimate beings and rule/save the world. And naturally, they just kind of roll with it. This Grimoire place, in any case, is taped and stapled together. Taped and stapled together from various original and familiar concepts and is inhabited by a chibi race called the Lilykin. And that's just about all the plot you're given. There's a bit more to it, I guess, regarding the various conflicts going on in Grimoire itself, but generally it serves as nothing more than a gateway to super adventure fun time. You know, Square keeps doing that thing where ever since Final Fantasy VII they've been trying to reinvent the wheel. They've had a few hits with the Garment Grid, half of Final Fantasy XII Tradizionale and the Materia system, but then also Final Fantasy VIII and Final Fantasy XIII and probably Final Fantasy XV and Final Fantasy XIII and Final Fantasy XIII-2 and Lightning Returns. And despite me actually liking the latter two, they decided to do away with all of that and just went with a very traditional turn-based battle system from the RPGs of yore. Random encounters, dudes standing on opposite sides, waiting on Ba, and the big bold blue menus are all present and accounted for, but what they build around that is still very much something fresh-ish. I say ish because what they did was essentially smash Pokemon and Final Fantasy X together into one big, lovely mechanical soup with croutons. The croutons being these tiny chibi people. Basically, the game has a gaff, a goof, and a gimmick. One being Pokemon, the other being stacking, and the latter being midget mode. Now, Pokemon is literally just Pokemon. You weaken a monster, called a Mirage in-game, and then catch a little fucker with a Pokeball prism. Once captured, you can place it on top of your head or sit on it to create a stack. Being that all Miragemons have their own stats and abilities that'll then be added to the character you've stacked them upon. So, they don't turn into fully fledged party members, but are more like a piece of equipable equipment. And because one needs to blend in with the locals, Lon and Rain can shrink down to size at the push of a button, at which point they'll have stack setups of their very own as well. So in a sense, our leading heroes count as a total of 4 party members, or party slots or entries or whatever you want to call it, but only one of which can be used at a time because reasons. It's not too bad though, due to there being quite a lot to just one party member. I mean, depending on which monsters you use, you can end up fusing magic spells, create all kinds of additional stat boosts, and the Pokemirages even have their own skill trees a la Final Fantasy X as well, with which you can buy new abilities with the points earned in battle. But on the flip side, certain elemental weaknesses could also end up being shared. Like carrying around a wicked fire demon is great and all, considering the literal hellfire you could then start spreading, but he'll also be fucked out of shit the moment one enters a water temple. Like I said, Pokemon meets Final Fantasy X. That's more or less the most basic explanation of the game's systems that I could have given. I hope it made sense. As it is though, it's all very easy to use, yet still has quite a lot to it. Like how your stack can just as well be toppled over during battle, for instance. Thing is that besides an element, each attack also has its own topple rate assigned to it. And depending on how well built said stack is, like how a fucking Iron Giant will be harder to knock over than a Chocobo, you can slowly start nudging them over as shown by the wiggly bar going from yellow to red. Once red, all monsters in stack will tumble, be incapacitated for a while and then be treated as individual party members from there on. Which is interesting as this means that you have thrice as many turns. But there's also no way in fuck one individual unit's HP is higher than that of the combined efforts of a hulking, throbbing stack. Anyway, while the system is clearly a carbon-cut copy of Pokemon, it doesn't quite function in the same exact way. For one, you can't just chuck any old cuck at the fuck as you need specific prism balls for each monster. You acquire these by killing an enemy once, thus gaining their designed cage of preference. Unlike Pokeballs though, they are essentially infinite. So once you have a certain type, you can throw it as much as you want. And for two, weakening them isn't always enough. Certain mirages will only succumb to your very whim under very exact conditions, like this big cunt only wanting to enter my pockets after being poisoned. A bit of a kink that is, but I won't judge. Another neat touch is that you can summon classic Final Fantasy characters. These are mostly used to deal massive damage and for cool screenshots to put on promotional material. Contrary to other types of magic, they're treated as more of a limit break than anything, being that as you take and deal damage, a 3-star bar will fill up used to summon them based on their star value. And you acquire these cameos by spending Arma Gems that you get from boss battles over at this goth Lolita girl who lives in an interdimensional tea room. Square Enix. Because fuck you, that's why. Now, that old school stuff is all well and great, but if you grew up with PS1 or PS2 JRPGs primarily, and ever went back to SNES titles, you may notice some things getting a tad grating. Not that any of those games aged poorly per se, but stuff like insanely high encounter rates, long repetitive random battles, or the threat of death looming over you literally every encounter might not sit well with everyone. And so, Papa Square has come to the rescue, and added a shit ton of modernizations and bitch boyifications. Battles too slow? Speed that shit up, fam! Tired of mashing attack ad nauseum? Set it to auto battle! Can't be fucked to walk around the hub world? Just fast travel! And with how cutscene heavy the game is, they even allowed you to not only skip, but fast forward said cutscenes as well. All of it's wholly optional, ignorable, and turn-offable, but I still quite love that it's there. And to suck the sperm right out of my cock entirely, they even included proper save points. Typically, when one tries to please everyone, it creates a bad. But here, they hit a very good fucking balance. It has the top-down, more abstract dungeons with the addictive random encounters and cheeky treasure hunting, and the tiny towns with the pre-render style set pieces. But then also have the stuff I just mentioned, all of which have been improved and streamlined quite a lot since they were first introduced. The auto battle, for example, isn't just a hostile AI takeover FF13 style, but a bit more like the model used in some of the mobile games, where you select the thing once, then activate auto battle to keep doing that thing, which when paired with the speed up function one can activate by holding down R1 makes for some really spiffy random encounters. And also, the level design is actually quite fucking good, as it's very much in the spirit of Final Fantasy X, meaning that there isn't a world map and that instead all areas are interlinked branches with one straight path and a few twigs splitting off here and there, often containing some treasure chests. I like it a lot. It's very overseeable and gives the proper illusion of free roam exploration, but refrains from going full Final Fantasy XIII with the hallways. Plus, with it not utilizing any actual pre-renders, the dungeons can be Super Nintendo levels of big, but PS2 levels of atmospheric at the same time. It's almost like people have been asking for something like this for fucking years. It even did one of those fake-out supposed to die battles where I foolishly wasted all of my shit, only for the game to actually be kind enough to give all of it back straight after. That's some good fucking design right there, fam. However, all is not well in the world of Final Fantasy. Yeah, it doesn't take very long to notice that it has a rather prevalent lower budget vibe. That's because this is a Tose joint. If you don't know what that means, Tose are like a no questions asked Japanese game dev for hire. You give them the money, send over some assets and the director, and they'll make your game exactly like how you want them to, resulting in titles like Ori Survivor, Super Princess Peach, and even Lightning Returns. Either way, because of it not being an in-house game, it isn't quite as polished or opulent as a mainline Final Fantasy title. Though I am gonna go out on a limb and say that that's mostly a good thing. Instead of spending months working on Noctis's hair getting wet when in rain or his fucking jacket flaring up appropriately while running, they actually bothered to simply stuff the game chock full of fucking content. So less flash and tons of bang. And I love me some bang. And the flash ain't all bad either. I mean, shit looks nice, the music is fucking great, and some other stuff meant to distract you from what I'm eventually leading up to. Which is that they clearly cut a few corners in some very unfortunate areas. Not saying that the game is janky per se, it performed at a rock solid 60 FPS for me, and the only things regarding this that bothered me are the slower menus due to it feeling the need to keep loading in the character models while cycling through your stacks. No. The bigger deal to me is how laughably easy the game is, and how underutilized all of its mechanics truly are. The toppling and wobbling with the stacks, for instance, is cool, but rarely ever a threat in combat as you can unstack and restack yourself when wobble or just take a wobble stopper before you fall over. And the catching of the Pokemon isn't something you really have to do to be able to beat the game. Once you got yourself a well-balanced party, which for me was about 5 hours in, you only occasionally have to switch out a dude or evolve one. I mostly just did it for experimentation's sake, but never really because I felt like I had to. Though I will say that being able to evolve and devolve, or transfig as the game calls it, which still sounds like a derogatory term to me, you transfig, is fucking great as it at least allows for said experimentation to happen in the first place. But switching shit around too often, I feel, will probably leave you underleveled in a big way, as all dudes you find start at level 1, and if not that, then leaving things as they are and cleverly losing the grid is exploitable as fuck. Seriously, besides a few snacks near the start, once I had my bearings and got a proper monster party going, every single boss was a complete fucking pushover, which makes the game rather accessible for beginners, I'd imagine, and more importantly, never kept it from being fun to me either, as some dudes do a lot of damage, making it so that you can never truly sit back and let the auto battle do everything. But for those looking for an SNES or NES or even PS1 style challenge, you will not find it here. Anyway, in regards to the puzzles in dungeon,
they are proper silly, fam.
But I don't think I've ever played a Final Fantasy game where they weren't. It's all on the same level of Final Fantasy IX's Ice Caverns, burn ice to make dough. They tend to be more of a running gimmick throughout a dungeon rather than a proper head scratcher. Like this one, where you have to change water levels to make passageways, or these big blockages called gimme golems that require specific items often found within the same area. So just a neat way to spruce shit up more than anything. And at least it encourages exploration to a degree, is what I would have said if the game wasn't holding my fucking hand at all times. Here, you can clearly see a character running in a certain direction, but still have your main characters tell you where to go afterwards. Or how about a very well-written cutscene cluing you in on a mechanic in a cheeky manner, only to still get a text box pop-up tutorial altering the flow of play. Now, I absolutely do not mind personally, as it makes the game good for beginners, and it certainly avoids the trap of being overly complex Final Fantasy VIII style, or too jargon-heavy Final Fantasy XIII style, but if handholding is a no-go for you, then you will go no-goes. I'm sure that sentence made sense in some realm of being. On a more positive note, I do like and sometimes even love the presentation and direction that they took with the story. Not too big on the chibi stuff myself per se, but there are plot reasons for it and the game's self-aware enough to where it doesn't feel horribly out of place. And just look at these town-ass towns, city-ass cities, and these varied-ass dungeons. Not something I thought Square was still capable of. Besides, the music, the banter, the happy-go-lucky tone that exudes out of its chibi boyholes all fit together perfectly. And the writing ain't half bad either, surprisingly enough. Like, shit's very fucking pun-heavy and comedically focused, which can be a bit hit or miss, but I'd be lying if I said that it didn't make me chuckle a bit here and there. It does have the usual trademarks of a Japanese game translated into English, where there's some odd formulation of sentences that sounds very weird when read aloud, but meh. It's all a bit box standard maybe, with Lon being the jokes boy and Rain being the serious girl with a wee temper. She'll get so mad when hijinks, ooh! XD. But I can't really say that I mind either, considering how well it's brought to life. It's a cutscene heavy game with oodles of plot, but it never really felt bloated or up its own ass. Also, literally the entire fucking thing is voiced as well. Anything from menial side quests, cutscenes, and optional bosses, all the way to each and every fucking single NPC. But what I love most of all is just how cohesive and well put together its fan service fueled world in all actuality is. It's not as abstract as Kingdom Hearts, where you just go to worlds and random Disney and Final Fantasy people are just kinda there. World of Final Fantasy has grimoire for you to explore by normal travel means like boats and trains rather than spacey portals. Some places just happen to be based on older Final Fantasy locales but have their own place in this world. And some of its inhabitants may be from another game, but they aren't just awkwardly forced in either. I mean, Ferris being the pirate lady from Final Fantasy V isn't important technically, cause here she's just a local pirate lady from a snowy port town. The guy from Final Fantasy I isn't the hero of light, but instead just a royal knight. And Rydia having a fire phobia isn't because of what happened to her in Final Fantasy IV, but because of what happened to her here in Grimoire. They're all citizens of this world pretty much and have been rewritten accordingly. This makes for a good, cohesive story and is honestly one of the better fan service implementations I think I've ever seen. At one point, for instance, I was just exploring this mountain-ass mountain. Could have been anywhere, and it certainly seemed like an original area. It wasn't until some spoilers happened by way of Tifa from Final Fantasy VII showing up in flashback cowboy attire that I slowly started to realize something. These rocks, this color scheme, oh my god, this is near Nibelheim, ooh! And lo and fucking behold, there it was. Nibelheim and a fucking Mako reactor to go with it. Jizz. All over my fucking controller, dude. All over. My room is a fucking mess. The Zeitgeist Final Fantasy is what they should have called it. Everything anyone could remember from the classics in one game. Though I can't deny smelling some thick whiffs of Kingdom Heartsness peppered throughout either. Mainly in its presentation and original characters do not steal, which will be great for some and a massive fucking titty twist for others. I think I might kinda love this game regardless though. There were multiple times where I played for like 4 hours straight, looked up at the clock, saw that it was 4 AM and thought, who needs sleep anyway? And continued playing. It's been fucking years since a juego has done that to me. Not sure how much relevance that has to you, considering that my taste is trash and that I like Dirge of Cerberus without any sense of irony, but this may or may not be my game of the year. Well, unless Final Fantasy 15 knocks it down a peg, but we shall see. The only significant faults that I can see it having is that it is too casual for some, that the ending sequence is way too long as it's the only point in the game where I actually got a bit bored, which is not a good way to crescendo towards your ending, and that while mostly fun, the main characters are a bit flat personality-wise. So, regrettably, some of the more emotionally charged moments don't quite work out as well as they potentially could have. But none of these issues really tainted the game in my opinion, and it certainly didn't Kingdom Hearts the fuck out by trying to do something needlessly complicated.